The prologue: a briefcase and a dream. Before the luxury boxes and the billion-pound television deals, there was the 1970s, a decade of mud, sweat, and the deafening roar of the Industrial Revolution's twilight. In the heart of northern England, Sheffield stood as a monolith of grit. It was a city where the sky was a permanent shade of charcoal and the air tasted of iron. Here, football wasn't just a pastime. It was the reward for a 60-hour week in the heat of the steel mills. But by 1978, the city's pride, Sheffield United, was a sleeping giant whose pulse was fading. Stuck in the second division, the Blades had lost their edge. They were a club searching for a spark in a landscape of grey, waiting for something or someone to remind them what greatness felt like. They needed more than a player. They needed a savior to drag them out of the shadows of the lower leagues and back into the sunlight of the elite. 7,000 miles away, the world was a different color. Argentina was a land of humid heat, tango, and a desperate, beautiful obsession with the ball. While Sheffield struggled with the rain, a 17-year-old boy in the dusty outskirts of Buenos Aires was rewriting the laws of physics. His name was Diego Armando Maradona. He was a kid from the slums of Villa Fiorito who played football with a preternatural wisdom, moving as if the ball were an extension of his own nervous system. When Sheffield United manager Harry Haslam boarded a flight to South America, he wasn't just looking for talent. He was chasing a whisper, a rumor of a golden boy who could do things with his left foot that seemed like sorcery. At Argentinos Juniors, Haslam saw the truth. He saw a teenager humiliate grown men, dancing through tackles with a low center of gravity that made him impossible to topple. In that moment, the gritty reality of South Yorkshire and the divine magic of Argentina collided. Haslam reached into his briefcase. The deal was struck. £200,000. That was the price of immortality. It is a figure that seems laughable today. The price of a squad player in the modern era, or back then, the cost of a few modest houses in the Sheffield suburbs. For that sum, the trajectory of global football was within South Yorkshire's grasp. Imagine it, the greatest player to ever lace up a pair of boots, walking out of the Bramall Lane tunnel into the freezing drizzle of a Tuesday night. But history is rarely a straight line. It is a series of what-ifs and sliding doors. In our world, the boardroom blinked. They hesitated over a discrepancy of £40,000, a sliver of silver that changed the destiny of a club, a city, and the sport itself. Today we step inside the archive to pull back the curtain on that fateful negotiation. We aren't just looking at a failed transfer, we are looking at the birth of a parallel universe. This is the story of the world that was nearly born in the steel mills. The story of the bargain of the century that wasn't.
The reality, the boardroom blunder. Harry Haslam returned from Argentina not just with a tan, but with the fire of a man who had seen the future. He didn't just have a scouting report, he had a golden ticket. He walked into the boardroom at Bramall Lane, a room likely thick with the scent of pipe tobacco and the heavy weight of tradition, and laid out a plan that should have changed the world. Haslam described a 17-year-old kid who could beat 5 men in a phone booth, a player who would put 10,000 extra fans in the seats every single Saturday. He was asking the board to be brave. He was asking them to look past the smog of the second division and see a global icon. But Harry Haslam was a football man, and the men sitting across from him were men of the ledger. To them, football wasn't an art form or a speculative investment in greatness. It was a business of margins. They didn't see the golden boy who would eventually hoist the World Cup. They saw a £200,000 price tag that felt like a reckless gamble. They saw a teenager from half a world away who spoke no English, and they wondered if he could handle a cold, wet Tuesday night in Rotherham. In that boardroom, the visionary met the bean counters, and the bean counters held the pen. The deal didn't die all at once. It died the death of 1,000 cuts. Just as the paperwork seemed ready, the Argentinian side, Argentinos Juniors, requested an additional £40,000. Today, in an era of billion-pound TV rights, £40,000 is rounding error. In 1978, it was the price of a mid-sized suburban street. To the Sheffield United board, this was the final straw, a hidden cost they deemed a financial discrepancy they simply couldn't justify to the shareholders. They saw it as a matter of principle. They refused to be held to ransom. It is perhaps the most expensive, principled stand in the history of the sport. Haslam pleaded, knowing that this was a once-in-a-lifetime alignment of the stars. But the board remained unmoved. They walked away from the table, closing the door on Diego Armando Maradona over a sum that wouldn't even cover a modern star's weekly wage. To save face, they pivoted to a sensible alternative: Alex Sabella. Sabella, signed for £160,000, was a magnificent talent. Magical Alex would glide across the Bramall Lane turf with grace, becoming a genuine club hero. But even at his peak, Sabella was a flickering candle compared to the blinding supernova sun of the boy they had just rejected. By choosing the safe option, the board hadn't just saved £40,000. They had signed the club's death warrant for the decade to follow. Within just 3 seasons, the savings would vanish as the club plummeted through the divisions, eventually hitting the rock bottom of the 4th division. They had saved the pennies, but they had traded away the club's soul, leaving fans to wonder forever about the ghost of the boy who never arrived. The tragedy of the boardroom blunder isn't just a Sheffield story, it's a cautionary tale for the ages. It's about the moment when caution becomes a curse. As Haslam watched Maradona go on to sign for Boca Juniors and then conquer Europe with Barcelona and Napoli, the men in that Sheffield boardroom had to live with the silence of a declining stadium. They had stood on the precipice of becoming the most famous club on the planet, and they chose to take a step back because the view was too expensive. History doesn't remember the men who balanced the books in 1978. It remembers the boy who went on to become a god. In the archive, this moment stands as the ultimate sliding door, the point where Sheffield United chose a bank balance over a legend, and the sport itself took a different path forever. The archive, the rise of the Northern Napoli. Welcome to Timeline B. In this world, the hesitation in the boardroom vanishes, the check is signed, the stamp is pressed, and the course of footballing history is redirected toward the hills of South Yorkshire. Imagine the scene at a grey, windswept Sheffield airport in late 1978. A 17-year-old Diego Armando Maradona stepping onto English soil, wrapped in a heavy, oversized wool coat, his breath visible in the biting northern air as he looks with bewilderment at the persistent British drizzle. To the local press, he is a curiosity. To the skeptics, he is a gamble too small for the brutal physicality of the English second division. But the moment he laces his boots at Bramall Lane, the skepticism evaporates into the cold air. The archive reveals a radical, almost violent shift in the tactical DNA of the league. While every other club is obsessed with long ball and the frantic aerial chaos of kick and rush, Sheffield United begins to play the Diego way. It is a hypnotic, floor-based revolution where the ball is treated with a sanctity the English game has never seen. As the months turn into years, a profound and unexpected kinship forms between the boy from the destitute slums of Villa Fiorito and the hard-pressed steelworkers of Sheffield. These are people who understand struggle, and in Diego's low center of gravity and his defiant resilience against bone-crunching tackles, they see a reflection of their own industrial grit. He becomes the steel god, a splash of technicolor genius in a monochrome world of coal and iron. By 1980, the transformation is total. Bramall Lane is no longer just a local football ground, it has become a global pilgrimage site, a place where the impossible happens every Saturday afternoon. The stands are packed to the rafters with fans who no longer hope for victory but expect magic. In this timeline, the crushing weight of relegation and the looming fall to the 4th division are erased from the books. Instead, back-to-back promotions are no longer a romantic dream discussed over pints in the local social clubs. They are a mathematical certainty. Sheffield United isn't just rising, they are ascending into a dynasty, led by a teenager who proved that even the heaviest English rain couldn't wash away the brilliance of a legend. The climax. 1982, the battle for the First Division. By 1982, the landscape of English football has been utterly terraformed. The archive reveals a First Division that defies every historical record. Sheffield United isn't just surviving amongst the elite, they are locked in a titanic, week-to-week struggle with Bob Paisley's legendary Liverpool for the league title. At the centre of this storm is a 21-year-old Diego Maradona, now indisputably the best player on the planet, weaving his magic not in the sprawling metropolises of Europe, but across the industrial heartland of South Yorkshire. The Maradona impact stats are staggering. The club's average attendance hasn't just grown, it has tripled, turning every matchday into a sold-out spectacle that leaves the turnstiles spinning. The local economy is experiencing a surreal boom driven by Maradona tourism, as fans from across the globe descend upon Sheffield just to catch a glimpse of the boy wonder. Yet, as the season reaches its crescendo, a dark shadow falls over the pitch, the outbreak of the Falklands War. In the real world, this conflict tore these two nations apart for a generation. But in our archive, the narrative shifts. Diego chooses to stay in Sheffield, making a defiant stand as an Argentinian hero who refuses to abandon his English home. He transcends the sport, becoming a living bridge between two warring cultures and perhaps the most powerful diplomatic tool on earth. He is no longer just a footballer. He is the eye of the hurricane, a symbol of humanity that persists even when the world around him is being pulled toward the brink. The verdict, the ghost of £40,000. History is rarely written in bold strokes. It is carved in the quiet rooms of midwinter, shaped by a series of small, seemingly insignificant choices that carry massive, earth-shattering echoes. In the autumn of 1978, the Sheffield United board believed they were being fiscally responsible, protecting the club's future by tightening the purse strings and refusing to budge over a minor discrepancy. They thought they were being sensible businessmen, avoiding a gamble on an unproven teenager. But in reality, they hadn't just saved £40,000. They had surrendered the chance to own the greatest sporting asset the world would ever know. While they patted themselves on the back for their restraint, the winds of fate were blowing in a different direction. By the time Napoli shattered the world transfer record to buy Diego Maradona in 1984, transforming an entire city into a temple of worship, Sheffield United was a ghost of its former self, gasping for air in the suffocating shadows of the lower leagues. They had chosen the bargain, and they paid for it with 4 decades of agonizing obscurity and what-ifs that haunt the terraces of Bramall Lane to this day. The lesson pulled from the depths of the archive is as simple as it is brutal. In the high-stakes theatre of global football, the most expensive thing you can ever buy is the legend you decide you can't afford. They saved the silver, but they lost the gold, and in doing so, they left a hole in the heart of South Yorkshire that no amount of fiscal responsibility could ever hope to fill. Could Sheffield have conquered the world with Maradona? Drop your thoughts below. Make sure to subscribe for more What If football legends. Let's grow this community together.